Neighbors hijacked our Wi-Fi. One decoy network and a paper trail flipped the room and forced the ISP to fix unsafe defaults. Tap like, hit subscribe and ring the bell, we are rolling. Steam from the takeout pizza curled under the yellow lamp while I opened her laptop and the dusty little router page. My girlfriend had moved into a bright apartment close to her sister and to me, and she wanted what anyone wants in a new place. Internet that simply works. The support rep had promised her, laughing, that the box was safe out of the carton. No silly defaults, just press the button and enjoy. Weeks later, her video calls to family overseas began to stutter and smear. By the third week, the faces in the window looked like melted glass. She called me with a soft apology. I know you are busy, but could you take a look? I packed my toolkit, grabbed pizza, and walked over through hallways that smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Under the hood, the line itself was fine, solid numbers end to end. The trouble lived inside the apartment. In the wireless log, I saw devices that did not belong, phantom guests sipping from her bandwidth at all hours. I took a photo of the router sticker, printed the support chat transcript, and slipped both behind a folder tab labeled Incidents, so the story would have paper bones. She watched the screen and whispered, "So someone is in my house." Digitally, yes, I said, and the room felt colder. I scrolled deeper and found the part that made my jaw lock. The network name matched the password letter for letter. Anyone who read the sticker or scanned the air could stroll through her front door. My thumb hovered over the trackpad while the pizza cooled, and a thought landed with the weight of a wrench. This would not be fixed with polite emails. The printer warmed and the page curled under my palm. The power strip hummed like a small hive while her eyes searched my face for a neat fix, and I had none yet. She stood beside me with her arms folded, watching the log scroll like rain down a window. "Can they see my files?" she asked. "Possibly," I said. "You keep sharing off, so we are lucky. But this feels like a window with the latch broken." She nodded once, the kind you give a surgeon, and said, "Fix it." "We will," I answered. "We will retire this toy and install a serious router like mine. Then link our homes by a private tunnel so you can back up safely." We split the cost without drama and clicked buy. While we waited, I turned the flimsy box into a witness. Buried in its menu was a serviceable log. I saved a screenshot of the client list, slid a little flash drive into the side, and let the thing keep a diary. Night after night, the same phantom guests arrived, parked on her couch, and chewed the line during dinner hours. I printed a clean summary with dates and times and tucked it behind the Incidents tab with the chat transcript. The apartment smelled like warm plastic and black tea. The walls held the faint thrum of someone else's video. "Maybe it is a kid next door," she offered, trying to be generous. "Maybe," I said, "and maybe a kid needs a lesson about doors." She frowned. "You mean block them?" "At minimum," I said. "At maximum, we teach them that wandering into a stranger's house has a cost." She looked at the little antennae, gnawed her lip, and finally said, "Do it right." I promised I would, and the promise echoed in the buzz of the power brick as the log kept writing our guest list for tomorrow's plan. I noted the names of favorite destinations in the log, redacted what did not matter, and circled the peaks where the line went thin, then stapled the packet with a click that sounded like a seal on a jar. The new router arrived in a cardboard cradle that smelled like dust and new plastic, and I set it on the table like a small animal that would protect the house. I configured one private network for us, hidden and strong, then dressed a decoy in the same familiar name so our guests would not notice the change. To them, nothing would look different. To me, the mask was a padded cell. I eased the decoy until streaming hiccuped and pages dragged, and I routed its lookups through a funhouse so that familiar addresses sometimes opened to unfamiliar rooms. No malware, no theft, no poison, just embarrassment, reflection, and a little chaos for trespassers. I taped a one-page note inside the cabinet that said, "Real network credentials live here," so visitors we actually loved would not get lost. She watched my hands and whispered, "This feels mean." "It feels proportional," I said. "They chose to sit on your couch. We are choosing what plays on the screen." On the coffee table, I laid out a print of the client list with the unknown devices highlighted, a highlighter stripe bright as a warning cone. The room smelled like dusted shelves and tomato sauce. A corner of the pizza box went soft where steam had pooled. "What if they complain to the provider?" she asked. "Then the provider will tell them what they told you," I said, "that everything is safe out of the box." She exhaled through her nose and said, "Okay, let the house teach." I pressed save, closed the lid, and listened to the router hum like a small refrigerator while the decoy began to glow on the air. and the only move left was to wait. I set my phone to record a short screen clip of baseline traffic so tomorrow's graph would have a before, then slid the page behind the Incidents tab and wrote a single word at the top in block letters. Lesson. Waiting taught us the music of their habits. Morning brought a bright rush of headlines and banking, then a sudden detour that dropped someone into a sober page on rebuilding trust. Lunchtime delivered shopping and short videos, tripped a different switch, and left a trail of frantic reconnects. In the evening, a device we had seen before lingered near a page that would raise eyebrows in any kitchen. Through the wall we heard the soft percussion of life going wrong. A chair leg scraping tile, a voice snapped low, a cabinet bumping closed too hard. I wrote times in my pocket notebook while the decoy crawled and the private network purred. She stood at the window and said, "This is going to blow up something that was already cracked." "I know," I said, and I did not feel proud. I tightened the decoy another notch, not to torture, but to nudge a decision. Either stop stealing or face mirrors that do not flatter. The apartment smelled like citrus soap and warm electronics. The router lights blinked a patient rhythm like a heartbeat on a monitor. By the third night, their traffic curve flattened, then spat spikes when a redirect fired. At one point, the counseling page popped again and a voice through the wall hissed, "Why is this on our history?" I stacked the new printouts with the old, clipped them in order, and wrote a calm summary titled, "Observations Without Adjectives." She touched the folder and asked, "Are we the bad guys now?" "We are the lock you were promised," I said. And then a box thumped against drywall hard enough to rattle a picture frame, which is when I knew the storm had crossed the hall. I turned off the television so the room held only refrigerator hum and the thin murmur of voices next door, and I wrote one more line under the day's notes. Escalation has its own gravity. On the fourth evening the hallway changed key. Drawers thumped, tape tore, and boxes skated across cheap carpet. Through the peephole I watched a couple 2 doors down carry their life in armfuls, not speaking. Our neighbor next door knocked softly later and whispered, "They were always online," then tipped her head toward the blown open doorway. I did not cheer. I powered down the decoy, folded the mask, and left only the private network humming steady like a refrigerator after a storm. We brewed tea that smelled bright and clean, and the apartment finally sounded like itself. She rested her head on my shoulder and asked, "Do you feel bad?" "I feel responsible for doing this cleanly," I said. "And I feel angry at a provider that told you the door was locked when the key was taped to the frame." I reset the logs, exported the bundle, and wrote one last page for the folder labeled Incidents, so the arc would have an ending. Her calls to family ran clear again. Her work uploads slid through without stuttering. Our little fortress purred without drama. For a week the building stayed quiet, the way snow makes even a city sound padded. Then an envelope with the provider's logo arrived. A glossy survey card asking how satisfied we were with security out of the box, and I felt my jaw set in a way that promised the story was not done yet. I set the card on the table, took a photo for the file, and heard my phone buzz with a message from an unknown number that read only, "Was that you?" The period sat there like a push pin. I powered the phone down, slid the survey into the folder with everything else, and told myself that if anyone wanted to talk, they could knock with a name and a civil tone. I stared at the survey card until the gloss caught the lamp and threw a little rainbow. Then I picked up my pocket notebook and wrote the only word that felt honest. Repair. The unknown text still sat in my phone like a pebble in a shoe. I did not answer. Instead, I built a clean bundle for the provider that even a board manager could not skim past. I printed the chat transcript where their rep promised safety, the sticker photo where the network name matched the password letter for letter, and a tidy timeline of phantom guests with dinner hour peaks. I exported the router diary to a flash drive, took a screen recording of the admin page, and stapled a cover sheet that said, "In ComType, out of box is not out of risk." Then I wrote a short letter to building management, attached the same bundle, and slid a copy under the superintendent's door, so the paper would breathe outside my apartment too. The room smelled like tomato sauce and warm plastic. The fan in the corner murmured like distant surf. Before bed, I forwarded the unknown text to my own email, printed it, and tucked it behind the folder tab labeled Incidents. In the subject line of my provider email, I used the words product security, not customer service, because I wanted this to land on a desk with tools, not platitudes. When I hit send, the little whoosh sounded smaller than I felt. An auto-reply arrived a breath later. "Your report is received and under review." I printed that line because paper makes stories harder to deny. I locked the deadbolt and stood still long enough to hear my own breath go slow, telling the quiet room, "We will talk when the door is locked by design," while the survey card stared back like a dare. Then I waited. Preparation tasted like clean water after too much pizza grease. I opened a fresh document and drafted a short, clear brief that could stand in a room without me. First page. Symptoms and impact, including work calls that smeared and family video that froze. Second page. Reproduction steps with screenshots, arrowed captions, and a note that the default sticker exposes both the front door and the spare key. Third page. Proposed fixes, from randomized credentials at the factory to a bright insert that forces a change on first boot, no exceptions. I printed the brief, slid it into a thin binder, and added sticky flags so a manager could flip without excuses. Then I rehearsed a 2-minute version aloud while the router lights clicked their patient rhythm, green blinking like a heartbeat. My girlfriend leaned in the kitchen doorway, tea steaming in her hands. What if they ignore you? Then we file the same packet with the state consumer office, I said, and tapped the binder. And we send a quiet copy to a tech reporter who will ask louder questions. I wrote both addresses on a sticky note and pressed it to the binder cover where my palm would feel it when nerves tried to yank me back. At midnight, an email landed from a product security address with the word acknowledge in the first line and a request for a call. I printed it, toner sharp and clean, clipped it to the front, and set an alarm so I would not pace all night. I also opened the tenant portal to log a note about the router shelf and hallway wiring so safer defaults would meet a safer space. The printer warmed and the page curled like a leaf. I addressed an envelope to the consumer office and wrote the reporter's initials on a yellow flag so I would not spook at my own courage. My girlfriend rinsed mugs. Citrus soap lifted the smell of plastic from the room. When the clock hit the hour, I squared the stack, touched the binder's spine, and answered the call. Execution began with a video call that smelled of corporate carpet in my imagination. A regional manager, a field tech, and one engineer whose eyes said he had seen this movie before. I shared my screen, clicked through the logs, and held the sticker up to the camera so the equal twin strings filled the view. The engineer winced. "Okay, that should never ship like that," he said, and his keys began to clatter. The manager tried the script about individual responsibility and best practice checklists. I let him finish and then played the screen recording of the phantom guests chewing our line. "The defaults invited them," I said. "Your literature told her not to worry." The field tech sighed the way people sigh when the fix is obvious and not free. The engineer proposed a firmware change that forces a password reset on first connection and hides the key on the sticker behind a scratch-off strip. The manager said, "That has supply implications." I said, "So does another class action headline." Silence did the arithmetic. Then the engineer promised a pilot push in our building and a bulletin to support staff by Friday. I asked for the bulletin in writing for dates and for a line customers could call that did not loop into a sales script. He nodded and sent a draft while we were still on the call. I printed it and slid it behind the folder tab incidents. The regional manager cleared his throat and added, "Please do not disclose this conversation yet." I looked at the binder, at the sticky note with the reporter's name and said, "Make the door lock by design, and I will have nothing to disclose." The engineer smiled without moving his mouth. The call clicked off. My phone buzzed again with the same unknown number, this time with a full sentence. "We know where you live." I opened the door the width of the chain. A woman stood there with a grocery bag crease in her palm and apology in her eyes. "I think we used your internet without thinking," she said, words honest as a dropped plate. Behind her a man shifted, wary and tired. "Our router died months ago," he added. "We just needed to send a file." Then it became a habit. The hallway smelled like old carpet and citrus cleaner. Somewhere a baby wailed and then hiccuped quiet. I kept my voice even. "We fixed our side. The provider is fixing theirs. Do not worry about the decoy. Nothing bad happened to your devices. Please change your setup when the letter comes." She nodded, almost grateful to be told exactly what to do. He looked at the floor and muttered something about the unknown texts. "If you have something to ask," I said, "knock like this and sign your name. No more midnight messages." She touched the door frame and said, "We will replace our box. And I am sorry for the noise." I slid a small printout across the crack, a one-page checklist that read change defaults, update firmware, write the new key on paper, not on the casing. The man glanced up, less wary now, and asked if we would share the model we bought. "Of course," I said, and wrote it on the edge of the checklist like a neighbor, not a cop. When I closed the door, the chain rattled softly and I realized my hands were shaking. I set the phone on the table, opened the messages, and archived the unknown thread so it could not spit bile into the dark. Then I sat at the laptop and waited for the provider bulletin to hit my inbox. The hallway went still enough to hear the elevator cable sing in the shaft. A thin metal note that sounded like a warning and a relief at once. The provider's letter arrived 2 days later. Perfume of fresh ink and toner still warm. It announced a firmware push that forces a password change at first setup, a randomized default printed under a scratch-off strip, and a blunt insert that says change this now in type you cannot ignore. It also admitted that older units may have shipped with matching names and keys. They attached a timeline and a tip sheet I could have written. I slid the letter behind the Incidents tab, took a photo of the new sticker on our router, and taped a copy of the checklist inside the cabinet where guest eyes land. That evening, I powered down the decoy for good. The apartment exhaled. Her call to family ran clear as a bell. Out in the hall, the couple's door wore a fresh shine from a new box. The air smelled like dust, cardboard, and faint citrus. I am not proud of the discomfort that washed across this floor. I am proud of the line we held. No lies, no malware, no theater. Just evidence, a fix, and a nudge toward better defaults. If you ever face a choice between speed and safety, pick the lock that clicks by design, not the shortcut that flatters. Keep receipts, write clearly, and teach without gloating. What would you have done in my place, and where would you draw the line between empathy and boundaries? Drop your take in the comments, and thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you never miss the next story, and above all, stay awesome. Later that week, a maintenance notice went up on the elevator board, reminding tenants to lift routers off the floor and change credentials on day 1. I photographed it and filed the print so the building's memory could match ours. The night settled warm and ordinary, the kind of quiet that does not hide anything. I set down my pocket notebook, smoothed the bent cover, and felt that small rightness you feel when a door finally latches without a shove.